Have we ever seen an NHL season where nearly every division top to bottom is this close in a point race? And I used the word parity a lot last week, and I'm going to try to refrain from using it this week, but man, is that going to be hard as we're now entering week 5 and still the standings are very tight. So today, let's avoid talking about contenders and pretenders and instead focus on some of the teams who have slightly slid in the standings and some who have really started to heat up lately to see if maybe we can determine who might be legit as we go throughout the season. But with all that said, we have a lot to get into in today's episode. So if you guys are enjoying the content lately, toss this one a thumbs up, subscribe now, and let's get into today's recap. Now, there are two teams in the Atlantic that I would consider to be struggling right now, and considering I've given Toronto 2 segments for 2 weeks in a row, how many times can I say 2? I think today I'm going to be focusing on the Detroit Red Wings and talk about what's been going on with them lately. Detroit went from being one of the hottest teams in the NHL to now being about a 500 team over their last 10 games. And to be fair, when we're looking at the standings, we're talking about a point or two difference, so it's not like they've completely fallen out of it or anything like that. They just aren't as dominant as they were looking through the first 3 or 4 weeks. In their last 10 games, the Red Wings are 5-5-0, and their offense has basically been anemic through a lot of these games, with a few of them being shut out in or only scoring 1. Detroit's top scorers have simmered down a bit. Players like Finney, who are contributing to start the year, have been a bit lackluster, and their goaltending has just been good. Less than ideal, but it's been, well, okay. It's hard to win hockey games when your offense goes through a bit of a dry spell, and to be fair, Detroit was dealing with a few injuries, like Patrick Kane missing some significant amount of time. However, I do think that this is more the Red Wings team that a lot of us were expecting going into the season than the one that started out the year. I do believe Detroit will adjust. I think that they're still going to be very competitive in this Atlantic division, but I do think when the playoffs are starting to come around, we're going to be looking at them as more of a wild card team than a team that's going to be top 3 in the Atlantic. So Detroit's falling just a little bit. I'm not worried just yet, but I want to see if they can pick things back up because they definitely don't look like the team that they were to start the year. In complete opposite news, the Boston Bruins have been one of the hottest teams in the Atlantic Division as of late, winning 7 straight until ultimately losing to the Ottawa Senators the other night 5-3. But if you're a Bruins fan, this should give you a lot of hope for the rest of the season. Everything is going right for Boston right now. Their offense is humming. They're top half in the league in special teams. Their goaltending has really turned the corner. And the team finally seems to be playing the style of hockey that they talk so much about in the offseason. I think for the rest of the season, we're just going to continue going back and forth on what type of team the Boston Bruins are. Are they a lottery team? Are they a playoff team? There's just going to be a lot of reservations when it comes to predicting the rest of the year for them. So I think we just need to keep an eye on Boston for now. And as for the rest of the division, I briefly mentioned Toronto has been struggling lately, dealing with injuries now, including Austin Matthews, which is a tough go for them. Montreal still leads the Atlantic, and the Ottawa Senators have been grabbing a few points here and there, mainly in the OT loss category, which isn't ideal, but hey, it's earned them the second spot in this one. The Lightning continue to excel and climb back in the standings, and after their tough start, the Florida Panthers and Buffalo Sabres continue to be up and down, but for the most part, this division, like all the other ones, is very tight still. Sticking in the East, let's go to the Metro Division now and talk about a team that very similarly to the Boston Bruins had a tough start to begin the year, but has really turned the corner, the New York Rangers. New York is now 9-7-1 on the season, 6-4-0 in their last 10 games, and recently their offense has come alive. In their last 2 games, the Rangers have scored 13 goals and have been getting contributions from the players that they've really needed to get going. Artemi Panarin has 6 points in his last 2 games, and Lafreniere has 8 points in his last 7, including 3 goals. Now, there's still some room for improvement with this Rangers team. I mean, they've only gotten 1 win at home. Let's see if they can duplicate that and start getting on a bit of a streak. Obviously, there are guys like JT Miller and Mika Zibanejad who could still contribute a little bit more. With Gabe Perreault coming up, now maybe he can inject some energy into this top 6. I think that the Rangers are starting to look a lot better, and it seems like all of that bad energy from last season has finally been shaken out of this team, and maybe we'll start to see them playing a lot better as we continue to move forward. So good for the Rangers. They're back in the mix, and they're finally getting themselves a few wins in the standings. Now, it was debatable going into the season just how good the New Jersey Devils were going to be. I think a lot of that was based on their injury history and whether or not this team could stay healthy. But right now, we are seeing a New Jersey team that is healthy, and they're playing some of the best hockey in the NHL. The Devils have looked incredible through their first 17 games. Specifically, though, their offense has been unbelievable, with their top 6 guys all having double-digit points, and Dawson Mercer really taking a big step forward in his career development. New Jersey is 7th in goals for per game right now. They have the 7th best power play, clicking at a 25% rate, and their team defense has been phenomenal, with guys like Dougie Hamilton and Luke Hughes really looking great on both sides of the puck. Now, truthfully, when I look at this division, there's only one team that I could realistically see overtaking the Devils for that top spot, and that's the Carolina Hurricanes. But if New Jersey just stays healthy, it's always going to be a question mark for this team based on their injury history. I realistically don't think that there's a team in the division that would be able to beat them in 7 games if they met in a playoff series. So I'm really happy with what I'm seeing from the New Jersey Devils. I love what Sheldon Keefe is doing with those boys, but they're just a team that I'm really excited to see when the postseason comes around, because regular season, they're usually a really good hockey team. And again, I just really want to see them stay healthy because I think the potential with this team is just through the roof. As for the rest of the Metro, the feel-good story of the Penguins has started to come down to earth a bit. They are 4-3-3 in their last 10, so let's keep an eye on Pittsburgh. Columbus and Washington sit at the very bottom of the division, but really everything is within a point or two, so don't get too worried. And then rounding out in the middle of this division, we have the New York Islanders and Flyers right within reach. But again, like the Atlantic and every other division, I'm going to keep saying this, tight race, so we're just going to have to see how the season progresses. Flipping out west now, let's start with the Pacific Division, and a team that I think we all had some pretty high expectations for, especially after they signed McDavid to that very team-friendly contract, the Edmonton Oilers. The Oilers are playing some of their worst hockey since that horrific start they had in the 2023-24 season. And I think that while a lot of fans want to blame their goaltending and say that Stuart Skinner is the problem, I actually think that it's their defense that has been very, very poor to start the season. Guys like Evan Bouchard, who earned that new contract in the offseason, and of course Darnell Nurse, they're just not playing like high-end caliber defensemen who make that much money, and I think that that's severely hurting this team as they go from game to game. They're turning the puck over, they're not getting back quick enough, and I think the Oilers, regardless of how much they put up offensively, they're just not going to win games that way. Look, the Oilers are obviously one of those teams that tends to pick it up as the season progresses, but with how good teams have been to start the year and the parity that exists in this league right now, I think it's going to be a lot harder to handle if you sort of fall in the standings than it has been in the past. And looking at their cap space, I just don't think that there's a trade that can happen to get them a new goalie or really fix this defense in any way. They're sort of just stuck in a bad spot, and that's all coming off McDavid signing that very team-friendly deal. So it's a really interesting team to be paying attention to, because they should be much higher in this division, or should have at least a little bit of a lead against some of these other teams. But the Edmonton Oilers, the inconsistencies continue, and yeah, things are looking a little bit grimmer than it has the past 2 years with this team. Speaking of another team in this division that we all have pretty high expectations for, and even entering this season, they looked phenomenal, the Vegas Golden Knights have started to slide a bit in the standings, just like the Oilers. Vegas has been on a bit of a tough stretch. They lost to the Panthers, Lightning, Anaheim, and now the Islanders in overtime. And this has caused them to fall in the standings a bit and sit dead smack in the middle. When to start the year, I think we all believed they were going to run away with it, with Jack Eichel playing like an MVP, Mitch Marner fitting in seamlessly. It looked incredible to begin the year, and now it's just been, well, average. Now, to be fair to the Vegas Golden Knights, they do have a few injuries. Mark Stone went down after starting off the year with some incredible stats, and it's also worth mentioning that Adin Hill has been out with an injury since mid-October, which means that the team has been using starting goalie Akira Schmid, who's realistically more of a career backup than anything else. Obviously, they did also bring in Carter Hart, it's worth mentioning, but he's not eligible to play until the start of December, so really they're just kind of put in a really difficult box right here. Vegas, am I worried about them? Absolutely not. This is a team that once they get healthy again, I think they're going to find ways to win. But it is something to mention, because we're talking about the league being so filled with talent this year and the margins being so small for victory and losing, that in the end, it could ultimately hurt them with seeding or even a playoff spot if they don't start to pick things up. But like I said, I'm not worried about Vegas. There's just so much talent on this team, and I think that they're going to be just fine in the end. As for the rest of the Pacific, shout out to the San Jose Sharks. They are winning and they are a fun team to watch. The Calgary Flames and Vancouver Canucks remain at the bottom, Anaheim Ducks at the top, and the Kings, after hearing me criticize them a bit last week, have really steadied the ship. Meanwhile, the Kraken lose a few and are coming back down to earth, but all in all, still a very tight race and still a lot of potential for a lot of these teams. And going into our last division, there were two teams that I was going to talk about, but considering the fact that I covered both of them last week and they have essentially done nothing to change what I really talked about then, I think it's time for me to give a little bit of love to the Minnesota Wild and finally give them a segment. Minnesota is such an interesting team this year because personally, I was really high on them going into the season, and so far, based on my expectations, they have essentially been meh. The Wild are 4-3-3 in their last 10 and have just been about average in nearly every statistic. Offensively, guys are producing. Defensively, they haven't been bad. And goaltending, they've been okay. Really, what I'm describing right now is a 500 team, which is exactly what the Wild are. Man, this entire video is just going to be me talking about how average the NHL is right now, isn't it? So instead of giving you guys another team with basically the same commentary, were you guys able to watch the Hall of Fame celebration this year? Some of the inductees included Jumbo Joe, Zdeno Chara, Duncan Keith. These are all childhood heroes of mine, and I can't think of more deserving guys than them. So congrats to those three boys and to all of the other inductees. You guys all have made such a huge impact on the game of hockey. And real quickly, to summarize the rest of the Central, the Avalanche comfortably sit in first, though I will say they are starting to become merchants of that OT point system. The Jets, Mammoth, Stars, and Blackhawks surprisingly are all right behind them, with the Blues, Wild, and Preds rounding out the bottom. All right, so that's all I got for the recap, but I do have a few comments that I want to read off from last episode, with the first one coming from @BergFinsFan, who says, Bedard and Celebrini turning into the next faces of the league has been fun to watch. I hope they have a Sid-Ovi-like rivalry and their teams meet up in the playoffs during their careers. Absolutely, they've both been unreal, but I do think we also need to give a special shout out to Leo Carlsson, who has been just as good as those two to begin the year. I think he's still top 5 in points and has really started to produce for the Ducks. But I think we're going to see a lot of rivalries between these three teams, and it's looking like the Western Conference has really started to pick up, with some of those teams that I grew up with being so good starting to come back into contention, which is pretty cool to see. The next comment comes from @Gabriel Rockman, who says, I freely admit that I picked the Rangers to finish third in the division ahead of New Jersey, and I expected the Penguins, Flyers, and Islanders to all finish under 75 points. For the Rangers, yeah, this is a team that's turning it around, so there's still a chance for them to finish top 3. I do think that with the Devils' injury history, it's not crazy that people were doubting them a bit, but they've really shown us that when they're healthy, they are a top team in this league. And as for the rest of the division and just the league in general, I don't think anybody could have predicted this. We're so used to seeing teams at the very bottom of the league just kind of tanking for top picks, and this year we're going to see a lot more average points coming through every single division, with most teams probably finish around the high 60 to 70 point mark. So nothing crazy from your end. I think this has just been a very unpredictable year. And the last comment comes from @SamanthaGames5691, who says, I'm a new Bruins fan and their performance has introduced me to the highs and lows of hockey, keeping me on my toes. Yeah, that's just what makes the sport so special. Really, all you have to do is get into the playoffs to have a chance. And I think if the Bruins can do that, who knows? Anything can happen. Also, as a fellow Bruins fan, it really has been a roller coaster to begin the year. And I'm just hoping that this team can keep up their winning ways and become more of a playoff team as the season progresses. So shout out to my Boston Bruins. But thank you to everyone who watched this video and who commented on the last one. If you enjoyed this one, toss it a thumbs up, subscribe now. I also have a few of my other weekly recaps here on the screen if you missed those in the prior weeks and want to catch yourself up with what's going on in the NHL. And again, thank you guys so much for watching and supporting the channel. I will see you in the next upload.